Weight loss is often talked about in numbers, pounds, calories, pace. But out on the trail, those numbers lose their power. What matters is forward motion. One step, then another. Progress becomes simple, almost primitive. And in that simplicity, something powerful happens. You stop fighting your body and start working with it. At first, the changes are subtle. A hill that once felt impossible becomes manageable. Recovery comes a little quicker. Your legs carry you further than they used to. And yes, the weight begins to come off, but almost as a side effect, not the main goal. Because somewhere along the miles, your focus shifts. You're no longer running to lose weight. You're running because you can. Ultra running teaches patience in a way nothing else can. You can't rush 50 miles. You can't shortcut 100. And you can't force transformation overnight. Weight loss, like endurance, is built slowly, through consistency, through setbacks, through showing up even when it's hard. There will be days when the scale doesn't move, days when your body feels heavy and your motivation feels light. But ultra running reminds you that progress isn't always visible in the moment. Sometimes it's hidden in resistance, in the fact that you didn't quit. And that's the real victory. Because the person who crosses that ultra finish line isn't just lighter. They're stronger, more disciplined, more connected to themselves. They're learned that limits are often illustrations and that change is possible one small step at a time. So if you're on this journey, whether it's your first mile or your 100th, remember this: weight loss is not the finish line. It's part of the path. The real goal is becoming someone who keeps moving forward no matter how long the road. And if you can do that, you've already won. Welcome in Running Miles with CHD. I'm your host and coach, Josh. Thanks for being with me today. Today we're going to talk about GLP-1s and peptides. So what is a peptide? A peptide are short chains of amino acids, typically 2 to 50, that act as miniature proteins and signaling molecules in the body. Okay? And previously, peptides were banned in 2003 and 2004, about 20 of them, and that includes BPC-157, AOD-9604, and I guess they've made them as a Category 2 substance, meaning they were deemed unsuitable for compounding due to lack of safety data. And they're going to vote on some more peptides in July of 2026. And that includes 20 plus different peptides. It's a movement through RFK Jr. And, you know, peptides could be the way of the future. You know, if they're deemed to be safe for the human body, but we already have really great effects with the GLP-1. That is a peptide, and you guys might know that one pretty well. And that is a peptide that helps you control your hunger appetites which something I don't have. I feel like I'm always hungry, like I must have some kind of problem with my body or something. I just don't have that signal that ever tells me that I'm full. That could be my upbringing in the South, where I would always eat all-you-can-eat buffets, and the mindset was eat until you drop, or eat until you can't move. I think it's pretty opposite to how they live their lives in Japan, where they eat until they're like 80% full or 70% full. Definitely eating like that, I guess my entire life, most of the time, probably maybe 35 years, has made it where I don't have that signal anymore to tell me that I'm full. So I did at one point try to apply for this GLP-1 drug, just so I can have the feeling of being full, not necessarily to lose weight, because at that time I was already in my BMI weight category. But it would be nice not to eat so much sometimes, I think. And I can manage it pretty well with eating whole foods, but I probably overeat on whole foods sometimes. So, anyways, I applied for it, but I guess I was in my current BMI, and they said I wasn't approved for it. So I don't know if anything's changed. I don't know how people get these peptides or whatnot, if they're in current, I guess, good BMI standings or whatnot. I guess they just pay full price. I don't know how it works, but I didn't really dive too much into it because I didn't have too much passion to get it. So I just kind of did it once and then left it at that, I guess. But the peptides, they're going to definitely change everything, I think. I mean, there's peptides for everything. Your skin, there's peptides for healing your wounds faster. So it's going to be very beneficial to athletes for sure to heal your injuries, especially, all sports, not just running, but in baseball and hockey and soccer, and European football, and just all sports, and if we can get this moving forward, I think what I've heard on it is you get a lot of pushback by the drug companies, but I always say if there's, if we advance as a human race, we should try to give the human race the best possibility of being the best the human can be. So hopefully we'll get some of this stuff passed if it's beneficial for the human body. And obviously there's always a risk when you take something that's good for you. There's always a drawback, but hopefully the benefits can outweigh the badness, I guess, of the peptides. And we'll see what happens in July. See if there's a peptide to help the Achilles. That would be pretty cool. So anyways, in this episode today, we're going to talk about the drug GLP-1, and we're going to talk about how you can apply it safely with some training and ultra. And then also we're going to talk about peptides and what they are, and just some more education about it, because I don't know too much about peptides. Just done a little bit of research on it, and apparently they're pretty amazing, what I read on. So they can affect a lot of different things. How do you take a peptide? Well, you can inject it, or sometimes they can put it in a pill form. But peptides. Yeah, one of the peptides is the GLP-1 drug, which is weight loss. And I know, being on the coaches on feeds, one of the biggest struggles sometimes is how do you train an athlete that is taking a GLP-1? So that is tough because if you're running a 50K or you're running a 50 mile, you're going to have to eat. And if you're not hungry, then it's hard to eat. But truth is, a lot of times on these ultras, you're not hungry anyways when you're running these things, and you got to be forced to eat when you're running anyway. So maybe it's not that big a deal, but maybe in your training, like the days that you're not doing a long run, and you want to eat some food when you're not hungry, that might be hard to do it in your daily, weekly volume of food that you need to be taking in before the workout. Also, you need to make sure you're getting lots of protein. I know that's a struggle that I always dealt with, is not getting enough protein probably in my training. So it's definitely hard to get the protein, especially if you cut out dairy. I cut out dairy and I took away probably 40 grams of protein that I was probably eating before that. I mean, if I take away cottage cheese, that's like 20 grams of protein. If I take away the Greek yogurt, that's another 20 grams of protein. So it's tough when you take out dairy and you're trying to get a lot of protein as well. So, and then if you don't want to do ultra processed protein shakes, then it makes it even harder. I guess you just eat a lot of chicken. But anyways, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to try to focus on eating and not eating, but we're going to try to focus on these peptides, and hopefully we'll learn together and better be able to, if you are on the GLP-1, hopefully this can help you better in your training. And if you're a coach, then this can help you with your athlete. So I did want to say that I appreciate you guys listening to this. Obviously, there's so much to listen out there, whether it's audiobooks or other people's platforms with the podcasting. So, thanks for spending your time over here. Hopefully it's helping you a little bit cross the finish line and enriching your knowledge. So, once again, thank you. I know there's a lot of information out there to listen to. So, thanks for being here. And
you are at mile 80 of a 100-mile trail race.
Which is brutal under normal circumstances.
Right, exactly. So you've been moving on your feet for almost 20 hours straight. Your body has burned through something like, 8,000 calories since you started yesterday morning?
Yeah, an enormous amount of energy.
And your muscles are just screaming for fuel. On a cellular level, you are utterly depleted, but your brain is actually telling you that you just ate a massive multi-course Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
And you couldn't possibly take another bite. Like, the thought of swallowing even a single calorie makes you want to be sick. So how on earth do you force yourself to eat so you can finish the last 20 miles?
I mean, it is a physiological nightmare. You're basically trapping a high-performance engine inside a body that believes it is completely 100% full.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm so glad you're joining us today because we are looking at something that feels like an impossible contradiction. We are exploring the incredibly complex and frankly baffling world of endurance athletes who are taking GLP-1 medications.
Right, and these are the blockbuster drugs we hear about constantly right now for weight loss and diabetes management. So medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound.
And the paradox here is just wild to me. Endurance athletes, ultra marathon runners, Ironman triathletes, long distance cyclists. These are people who famously have to eat constantly.
Oh, absolutely.
They are the ones crushing entire bowls of pasta the night before a race and sucking down sugary energy gels every 30 minutes on the trail. Their sport is basically an eating contest with some running thrown in.
That is a very accurate way to describe it, actually.
Right. But a GLP-1 medication is fundamentally engineered to do the exact opposite. It is designed to stop you from eating.
Yeah, it alters the very signals of hunger and digestion, which means these athletes are deliberately inducing a massive metabolic clash.
So our mission for you today is unpack how these athletes are surviving, and in some cases, actually setting personal records while navigating this clash. Like, how do you balance high volume, intense physical training with a drug that suppresses your appetite and slows your digestion to a crawl?
It's a really delicate balance.
It really is. And to figure this out, we have pulled together a massive stack of sources for you. We're looking at cutting-edge sports dietitian advice, medical clinic protocols, coaching platforms like Training Peaks, and some incredibly revealing first-hand community anecdotes.
The Reddit forum anecdotes are particularly fascinating.
Oh, they're amazing. There's a dedicated Reddit forum where athletes are actively living this reality. They're basically trying to figure out the rules in real time.
Because the rules are being rewritten as we speak.
Right.
And these medications were developed for managing type 2 diabetes and chronic obesity. The clinical trials did not account for someone trying to run 50 miles through the mountains.
Definitely not.
Yet because these drugs are so effective at altering body composition, they are actively reshaping the whole endurance landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you think about an ultra runner, they are essentially a high-performance sports car in a grueling 24-hour race. But taking a GLP-1 is like the onboard computer is actively restricting the fuel line.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks. The engine is redlining, it's begging for gas, but the computer is overriding the system saying, no, the tank is full, we don't need any more. So I guess my first question is, before we even get to the running part, what is that onboard computer actually doing? Like, how does this drug change the physiological engine of the athlete?
Well, we really have to look at the mechanics of the hormone itself. So GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. In a normal human body, this is an incretin hormone.
Okay, wait, what is an incretin hormone?
Think of incretins as chemical messengers. They're produced in your gut the very moment you start eating. Their primary job is to tell the rest of your body, hey, food is coming in, prepare the systems.
So it's just a natural response to a meal.
Yes, exactly. But the natural hormone flashes and fades very quickly. It does its job and disappears in a matter of minutes.
Okay.
But the medications these athletes are taking are GLP-1 receptor agonists. So they are synthetic versions of this hormone that have been structurally modified, usually by binding them to proteins like albumin in your blood so they avoid being broken down. So instead of lasting minutes, they hang around in your system for about a week.
Wow. That seems like it would create a constant state of, food is coming in signaling just all the time.
That is the absolute foundation of the drug's effect. When this synthetic messenger is constantly circulating, it triggers a cascade of events. First, it stimulates the pancreas to release insulin, but it does this in a very specific glucose-dependent manner.
What does that mean, glucose-dependent?
It means it only really pushes insulin when your blood sugar is actually elevated, which is why it stabilizes blood sugar so beautifully rather than crashing it. But the second effect is where the trouble really begins for an endurance athlete. It severely suppresses glucagon.
Okay, let's pause right there. Because glucagon is critical. If I'm understanding this correctly from the sources, glucagon is essentially the chemical key that unlocks our internal pantry.
Exactly.
When we run out of food in our stomach, glucagon tells the liver, release the stored sugar. And it tells our fat cells, release the free fatty acids so we can burn them for energy.
Yes, that is a very accurate way to visualize it. Glucagon mobilizes your endogenous fuel, the energy you already have stored on your body.
But if the medication suppresses glucagon, the drug is basically hiding the key to the pantry.
That's right.
So if an ultra runner cannot access their internal fat and sugar stores efficiently, and they're out there running for 10 hours, where is the energy coming from? Don't they just hit the wall immediately?
That right there is the core of the metabolic clash. When you pharmacologically blunt glucagon, you are severely compromising the body's ability to mobilize its own fuel.
That sounds dangerous.
It can be. And to make matters worse, during intense exercise, the body usually relies on catecholamines.
Catecholamines.
Yeah, these are your fight or flight hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline. They normally rush in to help dump fuel into the bloodstream during a really hard effort.
Right, the adrenaline rush.
Exactly. But GLP-1s can interfere with that signaling pathway too. So the athlete's muscles are demanding fuel, but the chemical signals to release that fuel from the fat cells and the liver are muffled.
Oh, wow. So the body is locked out of its own reserves, which means the athlete becomes entirely dependent on exogenous fuel, like the calories they are physically swallowing during the run.
Yes. They have to eat to survive the miles.
But wait, that brings us to the third major effect of GLP-1s, which is delayed gastric emptying.
Right.
So if they have to rely on eating during the run because their internal pantry is locked, but their stomach isn't emptying, how does that even work?
It creates a complete logistical nightmare.
It sounds like a bizarre time lag. Let's say you're out on the trail, you feel your energy dipping at mile 20, so you eat an energy gel. But because the drug has slowed your digestion to an absolute crawl, that gel doesn't go anywhere.
It just sits there.
Yeah, it just sits in your stomach. It might not actually enter your small intestine, where it can be absorbed into the bloodstream, until mile 25 or 30. By the time the fuel arrives, you have already collapsed.
The time lag is a massive hurdle. And the evolutionary purpose of that slow digestion is fascinating. The body slows the gut down to maximize nutrient absorption and to send profound fullness signals to the brain.
Which is great for weight loss.
Highly effective for weight loss. But for a runner, it means the stomach becomes a storage unit rather than a processing plant.
I mean, are there any advantages to this slow digestion on a run? It seems entirely detrimental.
If we look at the data holistically, there is one genuine advantage to the gut during an ultra when taking these medications.
Really? What is it?
Because the stomach is releasing nutrients into the intestines so slowly, the athlete experiences highly stabilized blood sugar. They avoid the massive insulin spikes and the subsequent reactive crashes.
Oh, right. That shaky, weak feeling that so many runners get when they consume pure sugar gels on the trail?
Exactly. The blood sugar line stays remarkably flat.
Okay, a flat, stable energy line sounds great in theory, but the physical reality of getting that flat line sounds absolutely brutal.
The physical reality is what the community calls the slosh.
Ugh, the slosh, just the name sounds awful.
It is. Because the stomach isn't clearing liquids or solids normally, athletes experience intense bloating and severe acid reflux.
I can't even imagine.
Imagine drinking a liter of water and eating 2 energy bars and then trying to run down a Rocky Mountain trail while all of that just bounces around in your stomach.
No, thank you.
Yeah, it leads to severe nausea and very frequently vomiting on the trail.
So you are literally starving on a cellular level because you can't access your fat, but you are physically vomiting because your stomach is overstuffed. That is a terrifying combination for someone 50 miles away from civilization.
It really is.
And because the fuel delivery system is so fundamentally altered, it makes sense that the absolute first thing an athlete notices isn't just a lack of hunger. It is a profound, undeniable change in their daily energy levels and their heart rate.
Right. And this is usually the point where a highly trained athlete begins to panic. They feel like they have lost their fitness overnight.
I definitely want to address a question you are probably asking yourself right now if you are considering this path, and that is, will these medications make me more tired?
The resounding answer from the dietitians and the athletes in our sources is yes, especially in the beginning.
Yeah. The data indicates you should expect a 10 to 15% reduction in your exercise capacity during the first 4 to 8 weeks.
It is a measurable systemic dip in power output. And the most startling metric for athletes who religiously track their data on platforms like Training Peaks is the effect on the heart.
This part blew my mind.
Typically, an athlete's resting heart rate will increase by about 10 beats per minute on a GLP-1.
10 beats per minute is huge for an endurance athlete.
It's massive.
If you train strictly by heart rate zones, meaning you keep your heart rate below, say, 140 beats per minute, to ensure you are building aerobic endurance in zone 2, a 10-beat jump ruins all your metrics.
Completely.
Your easy zone 2 pace suddenly reads like a moderately hard zone 3 effort on your Garmin watch.
It completely skews the dashboard.
So what does an athlete do? Do they just push through the higher heart rate and force their body to hit their old paces?
No, pushing through is the worst possible decision. We have to look at the mechanism behind that elevated heart rate. It is likely related to the medication's effect on the autonomic nervous system, specifically causing a slight increase in sympathetic drive.
Sympathetic drive being the body's low-level stress response.
Yes, exactly. The nervous system is slightly more revved up at rest. The heart is working harder before you even lace up your shoes.
Wow.
So if an athlete tries to force their old training paces while their heart is already under increased load, they risk severe overtraining and rapid burnout. They have to recalibrate.
Right. And the sources offer some very specific, actionable tips for this recalibration. First, you absolutely must recalculate your heart rate zones entirely. Do a new field test.
That's essential.
Don't fight the new data. Just accept that your physiological baseline has shifted. Second, you have to accept lower paces initially. You're going to be slower. And you basically have to leave your ego at the door.
Which is hard for competitive athletes.
Very hard. And third, which is a tip from the None to Run program that I think is just brilliant. You need to shift to time-based training rather than distance-based training.
Yes, removing the distance metric changes the entire psychology of the workout.
It really does. Instead of writing run 8 miles in your training log, which puts immense pressure on you to hit specific splits and finish in a certain time, you just write run for 75 minutes.
Right.
It removes the pressure. If you are fatigued, if your heart rate is high, you just slow down and jog. You are still putting in the time on your feet, which builds durability, but you aren't fighting a losing battle against the clock.
And the crucial context here is that this specific fatigue and the heart rate spike is largely temporary. As the weight is lost over the ensuing months, cardiovascular efficiency eventually improves.
Because there is physically less of you to move around.
Exactly. Imagine carrying a 20-pound weighted vest on all your runs and then suddenly taking it off.
You'd feel like you were flying.
Right. Once the excess non-functional body mass is gone, your heart actually does not have to work as hard to propel you forward during submaximal exercise. For the vast majority of athletes in the clinical observations, performance generally normalizes and often significantly improves by the 3 to 6 month mark.
The human body is just incredibly adept at adapting.
It truly is.
And we saw this adaptation arc perfectly illustrated in the community anecdotes from the Reddit forum, Zep-bound athletes. You know, we often talk about elite performance on this show, but the reality is that so many of these ultra runners are just regular people juggling insane lives. There was one story that really stood out. It was an athlete who was juggling a full-time career, grad school, and motherhood.
A schedule that leaves almost zero room for recovery.
None. Zero. And because of the stress and resulting hormonal changes, she had gained 30 pounds. Now, previously, she used to train 20 hours a week. 20 hours.
That is practically a part-time job just running and cycling.
Right. And she admitted that this massive training volume was basically masking a very unhealthy relationship with food. She was out running a bad diet. But when life happened, grad school, her training volume naturally dropped.
And you cannot out-train a bad diet when you're only running 5 hours a week.
Exactly. So she started a GLP-1, and she wrote about how the drug finally silenced what she called the obsessive food noise.
That phrase comes up so often.
It really does. She struggled immensely with the fatigue in the first few months. She said her legs felt like lead. But for her, finding mental peace of mind, not obsessing over her next meal while she was trying to study or be with her kid, was totally worth the slower running paces.
She accepted the trade-off.
She did. But here's the amazing part. There were dozens of athletes on that forum reporting her exact same trajectory. They accepted the slower paces and the high heart rates for a few months. But ultimately, once their bodies adapted and the weight came off, they ended up hitting personal records in their races.
Because the physics work out in their favor.
Exactly. They PR'd because they were significantly lighter, their joints hurt less, and honestly, a huge practical motivator they mentioned. Radically less chafing on long runs.
Oh, never underestimate the performance benefit of not chaking over 50 miles. It is a massive relief.
I can imagine.
But we should also contrast her experience with how dosage impacts this fatigue. The severe lethargy and the complete stalling of the gut usually occur at the higher weight loss focused doses.
So like the 10 milligram or 15 milligram doses.
Yes, but there is another approach.
Right. The Sajas highlighted a fascinating contrast with another Reddit user, a 63-year-old female runner who goes by the handle Kipit2020. She took a completely different tactical approach to the medication.
She kept the dose incredibly low.
Yeah, she stayed on a very, very low dose of tirzepatide, basically bouncing between just 2.5 and 3.75 milligrams.
That is essentially the starting initiation dose. Most patients titrate up from there after just a month.
But she never did. And her results were striking. She experienced almost no adverse effects, no extreme fatigue, no massive spikes in her heart rate.
Which is ideal for training.
Right. She has been comfortably running 25 kilometers a week. Not only that, but she is actually running faster than ever and regularly placing first in her age group at her local park runs.
That's fantastic.
It seems like finding the absolute minimum effective dose is a massive advantage if athletic performance is your primary goal, rather than rapid weight loss.
It is a delicate negotiation with your biology. The higher the dose, the faster the adipose tissue is lost. But the more profound the metabolic clash, the fatigue, and the gut paralysis.
And the lower the dose?
The lower the dose, the slower the weight loss. But the athlete preserves their daily training quality and their ability to absorb nutrients.
This negotiation transitions us perfectly into looking at the physical stakes of this entire endeavor. The fatigue and the heart rate changes we just discussed are really just the entry fee.
That's true.
To understand what an athlete is truly risking when they manipulate their metabolism like this and what they stand to gain if they get it right, we need to clearly lay out the mechanisms of the 5 major disadvantages and the 5 major benefits.
We should definitely begin with the medical risks because they are substantial. And the most dangerous threat to an endurance athlete on these medications is sarcopenia.
Okay, sarcopenia being severe muscle loss.
Yes, the clinical data suggests a stark reality here. Up to 25 to 40% of the weight lost on GLP-1 medications can be lean body mass.
That is terrifying. I was trying to wrap my head around this earlier, and I initially thought about it like stripping a race car.
Okay.
You want a car to be lighter so it goes faster, so you rip out the heavy leather seats, the air conditioning, the radio. That represents fat loss. But losing 40% lean mass, I thought, well, that's like accidentally ripping out half the engine cylinders. Sure, the car is lighter, but it has no power to actually move forward.
That's a good visual, but honestly, even that analogy feels a bit too clean.
Why is that?
Because a car doesn't eat its own engine to survive.
Oh, right, exactly. If I strip the seats, they're just gone. But muscle loss in this context is an active, destructive process, isn't it?
Very much so. If the drug locks the key to the fat stores and you are running 30 miles, your body still demands energy. Where does it go if it can't get fat?
I mean, I guess it goes to the muscle.
It enters a state of catabolism. The body begins to break down its own functional muscle tissue, converting the amino acids into glucose to keep the brain and the heart functioning.
So you are literally cannibalizing the very muscles you need to run in order to fuel the run itself.
Exactly. You become a smaller, lighter, but functionally much weaker athlete. Your power to weight ratio collapses.
Which is just terrifying for an athlete. And then the second major disadvantage we've touched on, which is the severe impaired gut motility. The sloshing, the nausea, the vomiting.
Right. It makes fueling during a race a logistical nightmare because your stomach is acting like a sealed vault.
But the third disadvantage is closely tied to that, and it's arguably more acutely dangerous on race day. Dehydration and blunted thirst.
This is a critical failure of the body's warning system. The medication physically mutes the brain's thirst signals in the hypothalamus.
Wait, really? So you can be sweating out liters of water, and your brain just doesn't sound the alarm?
Precisely. In endurance sports, there is a golden rule. If you wait until you feel thirsty to drink, you are already dangerously dehydrated.
Right, everyone says that.
But on a GLP-1, that physiological thirst cue might never arrive. And this creates an incredibly high risk for a condition called hyponatremia.
We definitely need to break down hyponatremia because I think people confuse it with just needing a glass of water.
Hyponatremia is essentially water intoxication. It happens when you sweat out massive amounts of fluid and sodium, but you only replace the fluid.
So drinking plain water.
Yes. If an athlete forces themselves to drink plain water without feeling thirsty, they dilute the remaining sodium in their bloodstream.
And sodium is critical, right?
Sodium is the electrolyte responsible for firing electrical signals in your nerves and muscles. If the concentration drops too low, the nerves misfire. It leads to confusion, seizures, and in severe cases, it can be fatal.
So the drug mutes your thirst, making you dehydrate, and if you try to fix it incorrectly by just chugging water, you risk diluting your blood. That is an absolute tightrope.
It is.
Okay, the fourth disadvantage is a systemic condition known as RDS, or relative energy deficiency in sport.
RDS is the consequence of chronic long-term underfueling. Because the athlete is never hungry, they consistently fail to meet the caloric demands of their high-volume training plans over a period of months.
I want to understand the mechanism here. How does the body react to months of massive caloric deficit while still being forced to run 50 miles a week?
The hypothalamus acts as a master thermostat. When it senses a chronic, severe energy deficit, it assumes the body has entered a famine.
A famine?
Yes. And to ensure survival, it begins a ruthless process of metabolic triage. It starts shutting down any biological function that is not immediately necessary for keeping the heart beating and the lungs breathing.
So it prioritizes the vital organs.
Yes. And the first system to be shut down is reproduction. Making a baby is an enormous metabolic luxury. So for female athletes, the hypothalamus stops sending the signals that trigger the menstrual cycle, leading to amenorrhea.
Wow.
And for men, testosterone production just plummets.
But how does a drop in reproductive hormones impact their running? I mean, they're not trying to have a baby on the trail.
Because estrogen and testosterone are not just for reproduction. They're critical for bone remodeling. Running causes microscopic damage to your bones with every step. Normally, hormones trigger osteoblasts to rebuild that bone stronger. Without those hormones, the constant pounding of high-volume training just degrades the bone.
Which leads to stress fractures.
Severe stress fractures. Eventually, the athlete's femur or pelvis will simply snap during a routine training run. That is a stress fracture caused by RDS.
The body is shutting down its own structural integrity to save energy. That's wild. And the fifth disadvantage, which we covered, is that higher resting heart rate and the early systemic fatigue that makes every training run feel like moving through molasses.
Exactly.
So those are the 5 massive, frightening risks: sarcopenia, gut paralysis, blunted thirst, REDS, and heart rate spikes. Why on earth are athletes enduring this? Let's balance the ledger and look at the 5 benefits.
Well, the benefits, if the risks can be managed, are highly compelling for performance. The first benefit is an improved power-to-weight ratio.
Assuming they manage to avoid the sarcopenia, of course.
Right. And it is a monumental. If an athlete can preserve their muscle mass through aggressive protein intake and strength training, shedding 10 or 20 pounds of non-functional adipose tissue makes them incredibly efficient.
They just require less oxygen to move.
Exactly. They require significantly less oxygen to move at a given speed. They become faster simply because there is less gravity pulling them down.
Which leads directly to the second benefit: decreased joint impact.
This is a huge one.
Yeah, when you are running 100 miles, the cumulative physical pounding on your knees, ankles, and hips is astronomical. The math is just wild. Every single pound of body weight you lose removes roughly 4 pounds of pressure from your knee joints with every single step.
Think about that over a 100-mile race.
Right. Over 100,000 steps in a race, that reduction in impact force can be the difference between finishing strong and suffering a career-ending injury.
The structural relief is immense. And the third benefit is the highly stabilized blood sugar we discussed earlier.
Right, avoiding the crash.
Yes. A slow, emptying stomach provides a slow, steady drip of glucose, preventing the peaks and valleys that cause an athlete to mentally and physically crash on the course.
The fourth benefit is deeply psychological, isn't it? The elimination of food noise.
This cannot be overstated. Many athletes use extreme endurance training to justify binge eating, or they spend their entire day obsessing over their next meal and restricting calories.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. When the GLP-1 silences that constant mental chatter, it frees up an enormous amount of mental bandwidth. They can focus on their career, their family, and they can finally view food purely as mechanical fuel rather than an emotional obsession or a reward.
I can see how that would be life-changing. And the fifth benefit is a fascinating look into long-term metabolic efficiency. You mentioned a study earlier that really surprised me.
Yes, there was a pivotal 2026 study published in Cell Reports Medicine.
Right.
It looked incredibly closely at the muscle loss issue we just discussed.
Okay.
The researchers used advanced imaging and found that while the absolute muscle mass of the patients did decrease, the relative muscle mass, meaning the ratio of muscle to overall body weight, actually improved.
Wait, really?
Furthermore, the actual physical strength of the remaining muscle tissue improved.
How is that even possible? How can you have less muscle but be stronger?
It appears the muscle tissue itself becomes denser and more optimized. The study, alongside animal models, suggested that GLP-1 signaling might actually promote a shift in muscle fiber composition.
A shift in the fibers themselves.
Yes, encouraging the development of fatigue-resistant type I muscle fibers.
Type I being the slow twitch fibers that endurance athletes rely on to run for hours without tiring, as opposed to type 2 fast twitch fibers used by sprinters.
Exactly. So while you might lose some muscle bulk, the muscle you retain is potentially highly optimized for the specific demands of an ultramarathon. Once the weight stabilizes, you're left with a smaller but highly efficient fatigue-resistant engine.
The stakes are just incredibly high. The potential for a leaner, more efficient, joint-friendly, mentally free athlete is right there.
But the risks are right next to it.
Yeah, the risk of destroying your metabolism, snapping your bones, and cannibalizing your own muscles. To survive those 5 disadvantages and actually unlock those 5 benefits, An athlete has to completely rewire their relationship with food. They basically have to entirely abandon the concept of intuitive eating.
And intuitive eating is the gold standard for normal human health.
Right.
It relies on trusting your body's natural signals, eating when you feel hunger pangs, and stopping when you feel comfortably full. But as we have established, GLP-1s pharmacologically hijack those exact signals.
So you can't trust your gut, literally.
You cannot trust your intuition anymore. Your intuition is chemically compromised.
Which is why the sports dietitians in our sources insist that athletes must transition to what they call mechanical fueling.
Mechanical fueling means treating your nutrition as a tactical job. It is dictated entirely by the clock and the spreadsheet, not by your stomach.
So how do you eat when your brain is screaming that you are stuffed, but you still have to run 15 miles? The sources laid out very specific, almost robotic rules for navigating this.
Yes, they are very strict.
First, they say you have to completely restructure the timing of your pre-run meals. Normally, a runner might wake up, eat a bagel or a bowl of oatmeal, wait an hour, and go run. But on these medications, if you do that, what actually happens?
Well, the oatmeal just sits in your stomach. When you start running an hour later, your body diverts blood away from your digestive tract to your working leg muscles.
Yeah.
Digestion stops completely.
Oh, no.
Yeah. You are left running with a heavy, rotting bowl of oatmeal bouncing around your gut.
That sounds miserable. So the new rule is you have to move that pre-run meal to 3 or even 4 hours before the workout. You have to give the delayed gastric emptying a head start so the food can clear the stomach and enter the intestines before you take your first step.
It requires an incredible amount of planning. I mean, if your long run starts at 7 a.m., you're waking up at 3 a.m. to eat.
Wow. Waking up at 3 a.m. just to eat a bagel. That takes dedication. And the second rule for mechanical fueling is relying heavily on liquid calories. We are talking about products like Tailwind, Scratch Labs, or the Morton hydrogel mixes. Why are liquids so much better than eating a solid granola bar on the trail?
It is a physical workaround for the mechanical block the drug creates. Solid food has to be broken down by stomach acid and muscular turning before it can pass through the pyloric sphincter into the intestines.
And that takes a long time.
That takes hours on a GLP-1. But liquid carbohydrate solutions bypass much of that mechanical breakdown. They can slip through the stomach much faster, providing a quicker route to the bloodstream.
Okay, let's get into the specific tactical numbers for intra-workout fueling. Because the sports dietitians have this broken down by the hour.
The metrics are non-negotiable if you want to avoid hitting the wall.
Okay, here are the guidelines. If your workout is under 60 minutes, the experts say you don't need any calories, just water and electrolytes.
Because your liver and muscles have enough stored glycogen to handle an hour of effort.
Right. But if the workout lasts between 60 and 150 minutes, you need to mechanically ingest 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. This is where athletes use easily dissolvable things like energy gummies or honey stinger pouches.
Exactly.
And for true ultra distances, efforts lasting over 2.5 hours, the target jumps to 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour.
I really want to focus on that last number. 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour is a massive amount of food to force into a stomach that feels completely full.
I was going to say, if I try to eat 90 grams of carbs right now, I'd be stuffed. How do they actually ingest that without vomiting?
Well, they cannot do it all at once. If an athlete tries to down 2 massive gel packets at the top of the hour to meet their quota, that concentrated sugar bomb will hit the stalled stomach and pull water from the bloodstream into the gut.
Which causes cramps, right?
Massive, paralyzing cramps. The only way to achieve 90 grams an hour on a GLP-1 is through a slow, continuous drip.
Almost like an IV line of sugar.
Essentially, yes, they have to take very small, frequent sips of their liquid carbohydrate mix, or nibble a single gummy every 15 to 20 minutes.
That requires intense vigilance.
It does. They're constantly trickling fuel into the system to avoid overwhelming the stomach and creating that waterlogged feeling.
We also need to address the recovery side of mechanical fueling. How do they combat the sarcopenia we talked about?
Yeah.
If the body is trying to eat its own engine, how do they stop it?
Protein is the only defense. It is absolute non-negotiable.
And the target from the dietitians is aggressive. 1.2 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight every single day. To put that in perspective, a 150-pound person, which is about 68 kilos, needs roughly 80 to 135 grams of protein daily.
That's a lot of protein.
It is, but there is a catch. You can't just eat a massive 100-gram steak at dinner and call it a day, right?
No, because human physiology has a cap on muscle protein synthesis.
Explain how that works for us.
Well, the body can only utilize a certain amount of protein for building or repairing muscle at any one given time. It's usually around 25 to 40 grams per meal.
Oh, I see.
Any protein consumed beyond that cap in a single sitting is either burned for energy or excreted. It does not build more muscle.
So if you are trying to halt muscle breakdown while in a severe caloric deficit, you have to pace your protein just like you pace your running. You have to spread that 135 grams across 3 or 4 separate meals throughout the day.
Exactly. It provides a continuous supply of amino acids to the blood, constantly signaling to the body, hey, we have building materials. Do not break down the leg muscles.
It is a relentless 24-hour job.
It really is. And this raises an equally critical question regarding the mechanical fueling concept. We have talked about forcing down food and protein, but what about the blunted thirst we discussed?
Right, the lack of thirst signals.
How does an athlete handle hydration when their brain refuses to tell them they need water?
They use the exact same concept, right? Scheduled hydration. The experts highlight this as the single most important safety protocol. You must completely ignore your lack of thirst.
You have to.
The protocol mandates drinking 20 to 40 ounces of fluid per hour of exercise. And as we established with the risk of hyponatremia, it cannot just be plain water.
It must be heavily concentrated with electrolytes.
Right. That 20 to 40 ounces of fluid must contain 500 to 700 milligrams of sodium every single hour. You literally have to set an alarm on your GPS watch.
Beep. Drink 3 gulps of salted water. Beep. Nibble a gummy.
Beep. Drink 3 more gulps. It is incredibly robotic. It kind of strips a lot of the romance out of running through nature, doesn't it?
It does. But it is the only way to keep the engine from seizing when the dashboard warning lights have been permanently disconnected.
It is a profound level of physiological micromanagement. And knowing what to eat and setting the alarms is really just one piece of the puzzle because there is a massive logistical hurdle we haven't even touched on yet.
The timing of the medication itself.
Yes. How do you time your actual weekly medication dose around a high volume training plan?
This is what we call tactical training. It is the intersection of the drug's medical reality and the athlete's coaching schedule. Because these GLP-1 medications are typically administered as a subcutaneous injection once a week.
Which means the drug concentration in your body is not a flat line. It operates on a roller coaster.
Exactly. It has a specific pharmacokinetic profile. When you inject the medication, it takes time to absorb into the bloodstream and reach its maximum concentration.
Okay.
For most of these drugs, the peak concentration and therefore the peak severity of the side effects, like nausea, extreme lethargy, and gut stalling, typically hits 24 to 48 hours after the shot.
So if you inject on a Friday morning before work, your side effects are going to peak on Saturday morning and Sunday morning.
Which, for a typical amateur endurance athlete, is a total disaster.
Because Saturday morning is when everyone does their massive 20-mile long runs. If you peak the drug on Saturday, you are trying to run your hardest, longest effort of the week while your stomach is completely paralyzed and your energy is at its absolute lowest.
You are setting yourself up to fail.
So what's the workaround?
The specific advice from the coaching platforms is that athletes have to reverse engineer their entire week. You must schedule the dose after your hardest physical effort.
Okay, let's walk through what a successful schedule looks like for a weekend warrior. Say your long run, your demanding 20-miler is locked in for Saturday morning. You want the drug concentration in your blood to be at its absolute lowest point during that run so your stomach functions as normally as possible.
So you execute the 20-miler on Saturday morning on the tail end of last week's dose.
Then, Saturday evening, or even Sunday morning, you take your new injection. This means the peak side effects will hit on Monday and Tuesday.
Which aligns perfectly with the valleys of your training schedule. Monday and Tuesday should be your designated rest days, or very light cross-training days, like an easy swim or a walk, when the physical demand on your body is at its lowest.
So you hide the worst of the drug's impact in your recovery window.
That's the strategy.
It is brilliant scheduling. But even with perfect timing and perfect mechanical fueling, things can and do go wrong. These are powerful hormones. The medical blogs are very clear that athletes need to know their limits. What are the specific red flags? Like, what are the warning signs that indicate an athlete has pushed too far and needs to pause the medication immediately?
Well, pushing through discomfort is a celebrated part of endurance sports culture. But ignoring medical red flags when manipulating hormones is incredibly dangerous. The first major warning sign that requires immediate cessation is vomiting undigested food.
And we saw this clearly in one of the Reddit anecdotes, right?
Yes. A user reported throwing up food they had eaten hours or even a full day prior.
If you are throwing up yesterday's lunch, your digestive system has essentially stopped.
It indicates that gastric emptying hasn't just slowed down, it has come to a dangerous halt, risking severe intestinal blockages. That specific user rightly recognized the danger and had to quit the medication entirely.
That's scary. Another massive red flag is recurrent soft tissue injuries. If you are an athlete who is suddenly getting Achilles tendonitis, and then a week later you develop a hamstring strain, and then plantar fasciitis flares up, your body is screaming at you.
It is signaling that it is in a state of RDS.
Right. It does not have the necessary caloric energy or the protein building blocks to repair the micro tears you are creating during training. You are literally breaking your body down faster than it can rebuild itself.
A third, more acute red flag is experiencing cold sweats mid-run. This is not the normal warm sweat of physical exertion.
Yeah.
If you are running and suddenly feel dizzy, confused, clammy, and a cold sweat breaks out, this is a sign of acute hypoglycemia.
A severe, rapid drop in blood sugar.
Yes, your brain is starving for glucose. If an athlete feels this, they cannot try to jog home. They must stop immediately, sit down, and ingest fast-acting, simple carbohydrates like pure sugar to bring their brain back online.
And finally, a broader overarching red flag is a general sustained decline in performance despite achieving perfect weight loss. I mean, the entire theoretical point of this was to improve the power to weight ratio.
Exactly.
If you have lost 15 pounds, the physics dictate you should be faster. If you're significantly slower, perpetually exhausted, and losing power month after month, the drug is hindering your performance, not helping it. You are losing muscle, not fat.
Recognizing these red flags highlights the absolute necessity of professional oversight. Athletes are trying to micromanage complex endocrinology. They should not be navigating this alone in the dark.
But there is a massive stigma attached to these drugs, especially in sports. People feel like it is cheating weight loss. We read a really telling story about a runner named Rauch Padita from Calgary.
Yes, his story is very illustrative of the problem.
He hired a professional running coach to help him reach his goals, but he deliberately hid the fact that he was taking Wegovy from his coach.
He hid it.
He did. He justified it by saying he viewed the drug strictly as a personal health tool, a private medical matter, not a running tool. So he didn't think the coach needed to know.
From a sports science and coaching perspective, that is a nightmare scenario.
Really? Why is it so bad?
The coach is writing training programs, calculating pacing strategies, and prescribing fueling guidelines while being completely blind to a massive systemic physiological variable. The coach might push Roglic to hit a certain pace, not knowing his heart rate is artificially elevated and his glucagon is suppressed.
Oh, wow.
It is a recipe for severe overtraining and injury.
So the experts in our sources plead for full transparency. You have to tell your coach. Furthermore, you should ideally be working with a registered sports dietitian, not just a general practitioner who prescribes the drug for general weight loss.
A sports dietitian understands how to fuel a 20-hour training week.
Right. And the sources strongly recommend getting hard data to track your body composition. Don't just step on a bathroom scale. Get a DEXA scan every 8 to 12 weeks.
A DEXA scan uses dual energy X-ray absorptiometry to map your exact body composition.
It just removes all the guesswork. If the scale says you lost 10 pounds, the DEXA scan will tell you precisely if that was 8 pounds of fat and 2 pounds of muscle, which is a huge success.
Right.
Or if it was 5 pounds of fat and 5 pounds of muscle, which means your engine is destroying itself and you need to intervene immediately.
And beyond the medical team, we cannot ignore the anti-doping aspect of this conversation.
Right. Are these drugs even legal in competition? Because people are setting PRs left and right.
Currently, yes.
Yeah.
But athletes need to check the World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA, regulations frequently. As of now, GLP-1 receptor agonists are on the WADA monitoring list.
Monitoring list meaning what?
They are not outright banned, but the authorities are watching them very closely to determine if the improved power-to-weight ratio and the potential for enhanced type I muscle fibers confer an unfair competitive advantage.
So if an athlete competes at a level where urine or blood testing occurs, like qualifying for the Boston Marathon or competing in a world triathlon event, they must protect themselves.
Absolutely.
They need to work with their doctor to ensure they have the proper paperwork, specifically therapeutic use exemptions, or TUEs, filed and ready just in case the rules change mid-season.
Furthermore, that medical team needs to be actively monitoring the athlete's blood work for severe nutrient deficiencies.
Because they aren't eating as much.
Exactly. When you suppress an athlete's appetite for months on end, they frequently miss out on critical micronutrients. Doctors need to be checking levels of vitamin D, calcium, iron, and B12 to prevent bone loss and anemia. Treating your medical team as an active part of your coaching staff is the only safe way to operate.
Okay, so let's look at the horizon. The athlete has built their team. They have dialed in their mechanical fueling. They are timing their doses perfectly around their long runs. They are dodging the side effects. Eventually, the calendar turns and race day arrives. Or perhaps they reach their target weight and want to stop the medication. How do they navigate tapering off the drug and returning to normal high-level competition?
This phase is what the sports dietitians call the long game, and it requires just as much strategic planning as initiating the medication in the first place.
Let's start with race prep. If an athlete is gearing up for what they call an A race, their biggest event of the year, like a 100-mile ultra or a full Ironman, the community advice strongly suggests pausing the medication entirely 2 weeks prior to the event.
The rationale here is entirely focused on rehabilitating the gut for race day. You need to clear the gastrointestinal tract. By pausing the medication for 14 days, you allow the delayed gastric emptying to slowly return to normal speeds.
Which is absolutely critical for the taper week. In the days leading up to a major race, an athlete needs to carb load. They need to supercompensate their muscles with massive amounts of stored glycogen so they have a deep reservoir of energy for race day.
You simply cannot carb load effectively if your stomach is stalled and you feel violently full after one piece of bread.
Definitely not. Furthermore, having a clear, functioning stomach allows for normal, efficient mid-race fueling. The athlete can process energy gels and electrolyte drinks without the severe risk of the slosh, the nausea, and the vomiting that ruins so many races.
But what actually happens physiologically when you stop taking a GLP-1? The transition timeline is important to understand. Because of the drug's long half-life, remember, it was structurally modified to stay in the blood bag. It takes about 5 full weeks for it to completely clear your system after your last injection.
It is a slow fade, not an immediate drop-off.
Exactly. As the concentration washes out of the blood, gastric emptying speeds back up. The stomach begins to process food normally. But more importantly, the neurological effects fade. The food noise returns.
The primal, undeniable hunger comes back.
Yes.
So what does this all mean for long-term maintenance? This seems like the most dangerous phase. How does an athlete keep the weight off once the pharmacological safety net is completely gone and their brain is screaming for calories again?
This is the ultimate test of the habits they built. The experts note that physical exercise becomes the ultimate anchor for weight maintenance. We have to consider what happened during the months of rapid weight loss.
Right.
While on the GLP-1, the athlete's resting metabolic rate, the baseline calories their body burns just to keep the lights on and stay alive likely dropped.
Because they lost weight and a smaller body burns fewer calories.
Yes, and also because the body, sensing a massive caloric deficit, became highly efficient at conserving energy to prevent starvation. Their metabolism basically slowed down.
So if they just stop the drug and go back to eating based on their newly returned roaring hunger, their slowed metabolism won't be able to handle the surplus calories. They will rapidly regain the weight. And tragically, they will likely regain it primarily as fat, not muscle.
To combat this metabolic rebound, they have to leverage the fitness they gained. Because they are now a lighter, more efficient runner, they can sustain higher training volumes with significantly less impact on their joints.
So they basically use their newly improved cardiovascular efficiency.
Right. They must use this advantage to slowly, methodically increase their training intensity as the medication washes out.
They use the running to build the metabolic fire back up, and the dietitians stress that they must maintain their dedicated strength training, lifting heavy weights 2 to 3 times a week. That strength training is essential to rebuild and maintain dense muscle mass, which acts as a metabolic furnace, burning calories 24 hours a day.
The ultimate goal of the transition phase is to rebuild metabolic flexibility.
Explain metabolic flexibility for us.
It is the body's ability to efficiently switch back and forth between burning stored fat for long, slow efforts and burning carbohydrates for fast, intense efforts, all without the artificial influence of a drug-suppressing glucagon. It is returning the engine to its natural, highly tuned state.
It really is a summary of the entire journey. The goal of using these drugs for a serious athlete was never just to be a lighter runner on a scale. The goal is to emerge as a stronger, healthier, more durable runner.
Yes.
The transition back requires taking the extreme discipline you learned when practicing mechanical fueling and applying it to a naturally hungry body. You have to eat with intention, you have to prioritize protein pacing and nutrient-dense whole foods, even when the returning hunger cues are screaming for junk food.
It is a profound transition from pharmacological control back to conscious behavioral control, but now supported by a newly optimized physical chassis.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. And I want to leave you with a thought to mull over, something that really struck me as we combed through all this source material. For decades, the entire culture of endurance sports has been romanticized as the ultimate test of mental willpower against physical exhaustion.
It is always framed as you against the miles.
Right. It is your brain forcing your body to take one more step when every cell in your body wants to quit.
It is framed as the triumph of the human spirit over biological limits.
Exactly. But if a weekly injection can fundamentally silence our most primal survival instincts, if a synthetic peptide can turn off the profound existential hunger and the desperate thirst that usually breaks an athlete mentally at mile 80, are we completely redefining what human endurance actually is?
That is the big question.
What if the ultimate ultramarathon in the future isn't about fighting the external miles or battling the elements, but rather mastering the microscopic chemistry of our own gut?
It is a staggering paradigm shift. We're moving from an era of managing pain to an era of managing peptides.
It is wild to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material today. We covered a massive amount of ground, from the molecular clash of incretin hormones and locked fat stores to the highly practical realities of mechanically eating gummies on a trail.
It's a complex topic.
It really is. We hope this gave you a much clearer picture of the incredible physiological tightrope that endurance athletes are navigating right now. Keep questioning the science, keep exploring your own limits, and stay curious. Until next time, we'll see you out there.
Cuff. The traditional medical script for this is honestly just agonizingly passive.
Entirely passive.
Right. I mean, you get the surgery, the doctor puts your arm in a sling, tells you to ice it, eat some protein, and then you just wait.
You're just sitting around for, 6 to 8 months?
Exactly. Just hoping that biology slowly stitches that, poorly perfused tissue back together. We literally treat the human body like a construction site where we just drop off a pile of bricks and hope the workers figure it out.
Which is a terrible strategy when you actually think about it.
It really is. But what if you didn't have to wait? What if you could inject a tiny, 15 amino acid code directly into that joint? A literal chemical text message that forces your body to immediately grow brand new blood vessels.
And mobilize those cellular repair crews in a matter of days, not months.
Yes. We're no longer waiting for the body to heal. We're learning how to hack the software of human recovery.
It's a fundamental paradigm shift in regenerative medicine. We are transitioning from this passive systemic hope to active, localized, precision-targeted signaling.
And that is exactly our mission today. So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive designed specifically for you, the learner. We are decoding the rapidly evolving, incredibly fascinating, and let's be honest, highly controversial world of therapeutic peptides.
There is so much noise out there right now.
So much noise. So our objective is to identify the absolute best peptide protocols for muscle growth, injury recovery, and ultra-endurance performance, while violently separating the legitimate clinical science from the unregulated, dangerous hype flooding the internet.
And to do that, we're drawing from a highly specific stack of clinical sources. We've got treatment protocols from specialized regenerative medicine centers, like the R2 Medical Clinic and the Boulder Longevity Institute.
Okay, heavy hitters.
Exactly. Plus, we're looking at surgical application data from Dr. Richard and Wyan at Lifetime Surgical, some really fascinating sports medicine case studies, and cutting-edge longevity research on mitochondrial bioenergetics.
It's a dense stack, but we are going to break it all down. So let's lay the foundation first. If you spend literally any time on fitness forums or in longevity clinics, you hear the word peptide thrown around like it's a magical new protein powder.
Yeah, people treat it like a supplement.
Right. So we need to define the physiological reality of what a peptide actually is because, well, it's not just food.
No, not at all. So to understand peptides, you have to look at the basic building blocks of human biology, which are amino acids.
Oh.
We consume amino acids in our diet, and the body uses them to build structural proteins, muscle tissue, hair, skin. Now, if you link a massive number of amino acids together, usually anything over 50, that complex folded structure is categorized as a protein.
Like a structural brick.
Exactly. But when you have a very short chain, say 2, 5, maybe 15 or 30 amino acids linked together, that is a peptide. And because these chains are so small, their primary job isn't structural.
They aren't building the wall.
No, they act as biological messengers. They're signaling molecules that literally tell the cells what to do.
I always think of the body as this massive, sprawling corporate office building. Traditional systemic drugs are like a CEO grabbing a megaphone and shouting a vague instruction to the entire building.
Which is incredibly inefficient.
Right. Every single department hears it. It causes massive chaos. And departments that had nothing to do with the issue get disrupted. And, those disruptions are what we call side effects.
That's a great way to look at it.
Peptides operate completely differently.
Yeah.
Because of their specific amino acid sequence, they act like highly encrypted emails sent directly to one specific department.
Or even one specific receptor on one specific cell.
Yes. Delivering a precise instruction to execute a single task.
The encrypted email analogy is perfect because it captures that lock-in key mechanism of cellular biology. Like a specific peptide sequence will float through the bloodstream and be completely ignored by 99% of your cells.
They just don't have the password.
Exactly. It only binds when it finds the exact receptor site shaped to receive it. And once it docks, it triggers a conformational change in the receptor, which sets off this intracellular signaling cascade.
It delivers the message.
It delivers its message, whether that's release stored fat or reduce inflammation or build a new capillary, and then the peptide molecule degrades very quickly.
Which naturally brings up the biggest source of confusion I see with all of this. If we are using injectable compounds to signal the body to build muscle, burn fat, enhance athletic performance, how is this biologically different from an anabolic steroid?
Oh, that's the number one question.
Because to the average person, this just sounds like performance-enhancing drugs with a Silicon Valley rebrand.
Right, I hear that all the time. But the distinction lies in how they interact with the body's natural endocrine system, specifically the feedback loops that regulate our hormones.
Okay, walk us through that.
When a person uses an anabolic steroid, they are injecting a massive exogenous dose of a synthetic hormone like testosterone or some derivative directly into the system.
Flooding the zone.
Flooding it. And the body has this highly sensitive monitoring system called the hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis. When it detects this massive flood of synthetic hormone, the hypothalamus basically panics.
It thinks something is horribly wrong.
It assumes the body has wildly overproduced the hormone, so it sends an emergency signal to shut down all natural production.
It's like the factory manager sees a warehouse totally full of stolen inventory and decides to fire all his own workers.
That is the exact consequence. The body's natural manufacturing completely halts, and this causes profound hormonal suppression, testicular atrophy, severe liver toxicity from processing the synthetic compounds, and massive cardiovascular strain.
It's a systemic crash.
Exactly. But peptides, specifically the class known as growth hormone secretagogues, they do not introduce synthetic hormones into your blood. They don't replace the hormone.
So what are they doing?
They simply mimic the natural signaling molecules that tell your pituitary gland to release its own naturally produced growth hormone.
So we aren't replacing the factory. We're just sending an email to the pituitary gland, asking it to authorize a little overtime.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it. And because you are utilizing the body's natural manufacturing pathways, you preserve those delicate feedback loops. The pituitary only releases what it is biologically capable of producing.
So it has a natural ceiling.
Precisely. The Endocrine Society's data highlights that this approach significantly mitigates the risk of the severe endocrine crash and cardiovascular hypertrophy that we see with synthetic anabolics. You're amplifying a natural physiological process, not suppressing and overriding it.
Okay, that makes sense. But before we get into the specific muscle builders, there is a logistical hurdle here. You mentioned these signals degrade quickly. Why do they almost always require a subcutaneous injection?
The needle phobia.
Yeah, I mean, if they're just short chains of amino acids, why can't I just swallow a peptide pill with my morning coffee?
Because the human digestive tract is an incredibly hostile environment by design. Your stomach acid, along with proteolytic enzymes like pepsin, are specifically evolved to cleave apart the exact peptide bonds that hold amino acids together.
They're designed to destroy proteins.
Right. So if you swallow a therapeutic peptide, your stomach treats it no differently than a piece of chicken. It rapidly breaks that carefully constructed, 15 amino acid encrypted email into individual meaningless letters.
And that happens before it ever has a chance to reach your bloodstream.
Exactly. To preserve the molecular structure so it can successfully dock with its intended receptor, the compound has to bypass the gastrointestinal tract entirely.
Hence the needle.
Hence the needle. It requires a subcutaneous injection delivering the peptide into the fatty tissue just beneath the skin, where it can slowly absorb into the systemic circulation.
Okay, so we understand the language. We understand the delivery method. Let's look at the actual messages. When the goal is maximizing muscle retention and metabolic optimization, the conversation always seems to center around a very specific combination.
The golden stack.
The golden stack, exactly. The clinical protocols at R2 Medical point directly to stacking CJC 1295 and ipamorelin. So let's break this stack down. What makes these two the heavy hitters?
Well, to understand why they are stacked, you have to understand how human growth hormone is naturally secreted. It is not a steady dripping faucet.
Right.
It's released in massive intermittent pulses, predominantly occurring during the deepest phases of our sleep cycle. But as we age, the amplitude of those pulses diminishes drastically.
I think they call that somatopause.
Yes, somatopause. So ipamorelin is a third-generation growth hormone releasing peptide, or a GHRP. Its specific job is to bind to the ghrelin receptors in the pituitary and trigger a profound, immediate pulse of growth hormone.
Wait, you said third generation. Does that mean the earlier versions were flawed? Because I've seen things like GHRP2 mentioned in forums regarding tissue repair, but modern clinics seem to avoid it entirely now.
That's a great catch. Yeah, earlier versions like GHRP2 and GHRP6 were incredibly potent at triggering growth hormone release and promoting tissue repair, but they had a major flaw. They lacked selectivity.
Meaning they hit the wrong targets.
Exactly. When they signaled the pituitary, they didn't just trigger growth hormone, they also caused massive spikes in cortisol, our primary stress hormone, and prolactin.
Oh, wow. And elevated cortisol catabolizes muscle and stores fat, right? Which completely defeats the purpose of the therapy.
It entirely defeats the purpose.
Yes.
So ipamorelin is considered the gold standard now because it is highly selective. It delivers that massive pulse of growth hormone without any significant elevation in cortisol or prolactin.
It's a clean signal.
A perfectly clean signal.
So ipamorelin gives us the clean pulse, but it's almost never prescribed alone. Why do we need the CJC 1295?
Because while ipamorelin causes the pulse, CJC 1295 acts as the amplifier. CJC 1295 is a growth hormone releasing hormone, or GHRH analog. It binds to a completely different set of receptors on the somatotrope cells in the pituitary.
So it's coming from a different angle.
Yes, its function is to increase the overall baseline production of growth hormone. But more importantly, the specific version of CJC 1295 utilized in clinical settings includes a modification called DAS, which stands for Drug Affinity Complex.
Okay, I see that acronym everywhere. How does that DAS modification actually change the behavior of the peptide?
Well, normally peptides are cleared from the bloodstream by the kidneys in a matter of minutes. They're very fragile. The DIAC modification allows the CJC 1295 molecule to physically bind to albumin.
Albumin being a protein in the blood.
Exactly. It's an abundant, massive transport protein constantly circulating in your blood plasma. So by hitching a ride on albumin, the peptide avoids renal clearance. This extends its half-life from a few minutes to like 6 to 8 days.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see the strategy now. The CJC 1295 with DAC is essentially raising the floor.
Using the floor, exactly.
It binds to the albumin and provides this sustained, low-level, week-long signal to the pituitary, constantly priming it to produce more growth hormone. And then you introduce the ipamorelin to act as the trigger, demanding an immediate massive release of that stored hormone.
You've got it. By combining a GHRH and a GHRP, you are attacking the pituitary from two different pathways simultaneously. And this synergistic effect produces a far greater elevation in natural growth hormone and IGF-1 insulin-like growth factor 1 than either compound could ever achieve alone.
And it's that dual elevation that does the real work, right?
Yes, that's what drives enhanced muscle protein synthesis, forces the body to retain nitrogen, and literally shifts the metabolism to preferentially burn stored adipose tissue for energy.
This mechanism is incredibly relevant right now. I mean, we are currently living through an absolute explosion of GLP-1 receptor agonist drugs like semaglutide and tirzepatide.
Oh, it's everywhere. Ozempic, Wegovy, all of it.
Millions of people are rapidly losing weight, but there's this rising panic in the medical community about body composition.
Yes, the skinny fat phenomenon.
Right. People are dropping 50 pounds, but they look deflated and weak because a significant portion of that weight loss is actually lean muscle mass. How do these peptide stacks intercept that catabolic process?
It's a huge issue. When you introduce a GLP-1 agonist, you create profound appetite suppression. The patient enters a severe caloric deficit. And biologically, muscle is very metabolically expensive tissue to maintain.
It takes a lot of calories just to keep it around.
Exactly. So when calories plummet, the body looks for ways to conserve energy, and one of its first strategies is to break down muscle tissue to harvest amino acids for fuel. It is a highly catabolic state.
Which is a disaster for long-term metabolic health.
Total disaster. To prevent this, progressive clinics like Perfect B are actively layering GLP-1 medications with growth hormone secret dogs.
So they're stacking the weight loss drug with the peptide.
Right. The GLP-1 suppresses the appetite and forces the caloric deficit, while the CJ Cipamarelin stack provides a constant anabolic countersignal. It instructs the body to preserve lean muscle and strictly target fat stores for its energy needs.
Speaking of targeting fat, the source material highlights another peptide in this category that has a very specific FDA-approved pedigree, tesamorelin, and its target seems to be highly specialized.
Tesamorelin is really fascinating because it was specifically developed and FDA approved to treat HIV-associated lipodystrophy.
Which is what exactly?
Well, patients on certain antiretroviral therapies develop a dangerous accumulation of visceral fat. And it is vital to distinguish between subcutaneous fat, which is the soft fat just under the skin that you can pinch, and visceral fat.
Right, visceral fat is the dangerous stuff.
Very dangerous. Visceral fat is hard, deep abdominal fat that physically wraps around your internal organs, like your liver and intestines. It is highly metabolically active, constantly releasing inflammatory cytokines into your system.
And tesamorelin attacks that specifically.
Yes. Tesamorelin proved to be exceptionally effective at mobilizing and cleaving specifically that dangerous visceral adipose tissue while leaving lean muscle entirely intact.
So if a patient presents at a clinic with high levels of hard, visceral belly fat, a physician might prioritize tesamorelin over the CJC stack to aggressively target that specific tissue type.
Exactly. It's about precision.
Okay, let's pivot to the oral alternatives because there is one compound that constantly dominates the conversation around muscle building, MK677 or ibutamoren.
Oh, MK677.
Some people swear by it, others treat it as a massive risk. Let's clarify the biology here for the listener.
Well, the first clarification is structural. MK677 is not actually a peptide.
Wait, really? It's always grouped with them?
I know, it's sold alongside them everywhere. But it's actually a non-peptide spiroindolene. Because it lacks the fragile amino acid bonds of true peptides, it easily survives the proteolytic enzymes of the stomach.
Oh, so that's why you can take it as a pill or a liquid drop.
Exactly. It is highly bioavailable orally, which is the primary reason it is so incredibly popular. People want the benefits of secretagogues, but they really want to avoid daily subcutaneous injections.
Right. But if it's an oral compound and not a peptide, how does it signal the pituitary to release growth hormone?
It acts as an incredibly potent ghrelin receptor agonist.
Ghrelin, that's the hunger hormone, right?
Yes. Ghrelin is the endogenous hormone naturally secreted by your stomach when it is empty. MK677 binds to these exact receptors in the hypothalamus and the pituitary, essentially mimicking a state of starvation.
So it tricks the brain into thinking you're starving.
Right. And the pituitary responds to this ghrelin signal by pumping out massive amounts of growth hormone and IGF-1. However, because it is directly agonizing the hunger pathway, the most immediate and profound side effect is an insatiable, ravenous appetite.
Which sounds incredibly counterproductive if your goal, like the GLP-1 users, is to lose body fat.
Oh, it is entirely counterproductive for fat loss. I mean, if a user is in a bulking phase, struggling to consume the massive caloric surplus required to build sheer mass MK677 can be highly advantageous. It literally forces them to eat.
But if they want to lean out,
If the goal is leaning out, the appetite stimulation will absolutely shatter any caloric deficit. And furthermore, MK677 severely impacts insulin sensitivity.
how so?
By keeping growth hormone elevated constantly, it mobilizes so much blood glucose that it can literally push a user into a pre-diabetic state if their fasting blood sugar isn't rigorously monitored. It is a very blunt instrument compared to the precision of something like ipamorelin.
Wow. Okay, so we've mapped out how to optimize the body's metabolic engine to retain muscle and burn fat. But high-performance engine is entirely useless if the chassis is breaking.
True.
Whether you are a casual weekend warrior or an elite athlete, you eventually hit the exact same biological bottleneck, structural tissue failure. You tear a rotator cuff, you rupture an Achilles, or you develop chronic tendonitis. This brings us to structural restoration and what is colloquially known as the Wolverine stack.
Ah, yes. This is the area of peptide therapy that truly borders on science fiction.
It really does.
The Wolverine stack is a combination of two specific peptides, BPC 157 and TB500. It earned that moniker because of its ability to accelerate tissue repair at a rate that, mimics the regenerative powers of the comic book character.
Let's isolate BPC 157 first. BPC stands for Body Protection Compound. The origin of this peptide is deeply strange. Like, it isn't derived from a brain chemical or a muscle protein. Where does it actually come from?
BPC 157 is a synthetic 15 amino acid sequence isolated from human gastric juice.
Stomach acid. The body naturally produces a healing peptide to survive its own digestive fluids. That's wild.
It is wild. The interior of the stomach is an incredibly corrosive, acidic environment. The mucosal lining requires constant hyperaccelerated repair just to prevent the stomach from digesting itself.
All right.
BPC 157 is a critical biological signal driving that localized repair. And researchers discovered that when this sequence is synthesized and administered outside the digestive tract, say injected near a torn ligament or strained muscle, it exerts those exact same hyperaccelerative healing properties on musculoskeletal tissue.
Okay, but what is the actual mechanism? When BPC 157 docks with a receptor on a torn tendon, what is the encrypted email telling the cell to do?
It initiates a really complex multi-pronged healing cascade. Initially, it heavily upregulates the expression of growth hormone receptors on fibroblasts.
Fibroblasts being the cells that build collagen.
Correct. They are the cellular architects responsible for laying down new collagen, which is the structural scaffolding of tendons and ligaments. By making these cells hypersensitive to growth hormone, they work exponentially faster.
So it puts the repair crew in overdrive.
Exactly. And simultaneously, it stimulates the endothelial nitric oxide synthase pathway, massively increasing blood flow to the injury site. But the true superpower of BPC 157 is a biological process called angiogenesis.
Angiogenesis, the creation of brand new blood vessels.
Right. Connective tissues like tendons and ligaments are notoriously avascular. They have a terrible natural blood supply.
Which is why they take forever to heal.
Exactly. When you cut your skin, it bleeds heavily and heals in days. When you tear a ligament, there is very little blood flow to deliver the oxygen, the amino acids, and the repair cells required to fix the damage. BPC 157 physically forces the creation of new vascular networks, sprouting new capillaries directly into the damaged, poorly perfused tissue.
It literally removes the delivery bottleneck.
Yes, it builds a new supply chain.
Okay, that handles the supply line. What does the second half of the stack, TB500, bring to the table?
Well, TB500 is a synthetic fragment of thymosin beta-4, which is a larger peptide naturally produced by the thymus gland and present in virtually all human cells. While BPC 157 drives localized blood vessel creation, TB500 is systemic.
Meaning it works throughout the whole body.
Yes. Its primary mechanism of action is the upregulation of a cellular protein called actin. Actin is an essential component of the cytoskeleton, the internal scaffolding that gives a cell its shape and allows it to move.
So by upregulating actin, TB500 makes the repair cells more mobile.
Exactly. It drastically increases cellular migration. The specialized repair cells can travel to the site of the inflammation much faster. Furthermore, TB500 has a profound effect on the extracellular matrix.
How so?
It specifically prevents the cross-linking of excessive collagen that forms restrictive scar tissue.
Oh, and scar tissue is the absolute enemy of athletic recovery.
It's the worst. It's rigid, it's inflexible, and it's highly prone to re-injury. TB500 dictates that the repairing tissue lays down in flexible, functional, parallel lines rather than haphazard, stiff fiber spans.
This entirely explains why athletes are obsessed with it. But reading the surgical data from Dr. Richard Nguyen at Lifetime Surgical, he is applying these identical mechanisms to post-operative patients.
Yes, the surgical applications are groundbreaking.
How does injecting BPC 157 change the recovery trajectory for someone waking up from a complex surgery?
From a biological perspective, surgery is simply massive controlled trauma. The body reacts to a surgeon's scalpel with the exact same inflammatory and repair cascades as it does a sports injury.
God doesn't know the difference.
Right. By introducing BPC 157 and TB500 into the post-operative protocol, clinics are fundamentally altering the timeline of tissue reconstruction. The angiogenesis, driven by BPC 157, ensures the surgical incisions close significantly faster.
And the TB500.
TB500 limits the internal adhesions and scar tissue formation around the operation site.
Dr. Nguyen's note specifically mentioned tensile strength too.
Yeah.
Are they saying the repair tissue is actually stronger than it would be otherwise?
Yes. Clinical data shows that early in the post-operative phase, the tensile strength of the repaired ligaments, or say a sutured abdominal wall, is vastly superior in peptide-assisted models. The new collagen is denser and better organized.
That is incredible.
And there is also a strategic timing element utilized by progressive surgeons. Some protocols introduce the peptides slightly before surgery to pre-optimize the tissue, increasing its resilience.
Rehab, essentially.
Exactly. Then, immediately post-surgery, the peptides hijack the body's massive natural inflammatory response, ensuring that the flood of repair cells doesn't result in chaotic scarring, but precise, structurally sound regeneration.
Okay, I have to apply some logical pushback here.
Please do.
The ability to force the body to grow new blood vessels on demand angiogenesis is an incredible tool for healing a tendon. But if we are sending an encrypted email that commands cells to rapidly build new blood supplies, isn't that exactly what cancer cells do to survive?
It is.
Right, because if a tumor can't build a blood supply, it starves.
That is an incredibly astute observation, and it highlights the primary theoretical danger of angiogenic therapies. The biological mechanism BPC-157 uses to vascularize a tendon involves upregulating vascular endothelial growth factor, or VEGF.
Okay.
That exact same VEGF pathway is routinely hijacked by malignant tumors to build the vascular networks they need to grow and metastasize.
So if you have an undiagnosed tumor and you take BPC-157 for a shoulder injury, you could inadvertently feed the cancer.
This is the theoretical oncogenesis risk. Now, there is no evidence that BPC-157 causes cancer or mutates healthy cells.
It doesn't spark the fire.
Right. However, if malignancy already exists, introducing a powerful angiogenic agent could theoretically accelerate its growth by providing it with enhanced blood flow.
Throwing gasoline on it.
Exactly. And this is precisely why responsible clinics mandate comprehensive medical screening, including tumor marker labs, before ever prescribing these regenerative compounds. Anyone with an active cancer diagnosis or a history of specific malignancies is strictly contraindicated for BPC-157.
You are manipulating core biological software, and you must respect the consequences of those commands.
Absolutely. You cannot do this blindly.
Okay, so BPC-157 and TB500 repair the physical hardware of the body. But what happens when the cellular engine itself fails? Let's push human physiology to the absolute extreme here.
Let's do it.
Consider the ultra-endurance athlete running a 100-mile race through the mountains. They aren't just dealing with torn muscle fibers, they are dealing with complete systemic bioenergetic collapse.
Yeah.
How do peptides address the exhaustion of the cellular power plant?
When an athlete engages in 24 hours of continuous output, they push their physiology far beyond normal homeostatic boundaries. They exhaust their glycogen reserves almost immediately.
Right, the carb stores are gone.
Gone. As they continue to demand massive amounts of energy, the body enters a state of severe metabolic crisis. It hits what we call the catabolic cliff.
The catabolic cliff. What does that look like biologically?
To keep the brain supplied with glucose, the body resorts to gluconeogenesis. It begins actively destroying its own lean muscle tissue, converting those structural amino acids into usable fuel.
You are literally eating your own engine to keep the car moving.
Exactly. And the damage occurs at a microscopic level. The demand for ATP adenosine triphosphate, the fundamental unit of cellular energy, is so immense that the mitochondria are forced to run constantly at maximum capacity.
Or redlining.
Redlining for hours. This generates a massive amount of reactive oxygen species, or free radicals. This oxidative stress physically damages the internal architecture of the mitochondria, rendering them dysfunctional. They leak energy and produce less ATP.
So the battery is permanently damaged.
Yes.
This is where we introduce a completely different class of peptides, mitochondrial-derived peptides, or MDPs. The standout here is MOTS. Now, the origin of MOTSC is totally different from anything else we've discussed. It doesn't come from the stomach or the pituitary.
No, the origin of MOTSC requires a brief foray into evolutionary biology.
Okay, lay it on us.
The vast majority of the proteins and peptides in your body are encoded by the nuclear DNA, the genome locked inside the nucleus of your cells. However, mitochondria are unique.
Because they used to be their own organism, right?
Exactly. According to the symbiogenesis theory, mitochondria were once independent bacteria that merged with our cellular ancestors billions of years ago. Because of this, mitochondria retain their own distinct, separate DNA loop.
That is so cool.
Right. MOTSC is a 16 amino acid peptide that is encoded exclusively within that mitochondrial DNA.
It's literally an instruction manual hidden inside the engine itself. So what does the MOTSC signal do when the body is in crisis?
MOTSC is a master metabolic regulator. During states of extreme metabolic stress, like an ultramarathon or severe caloric restriction, the mitochondria synthesize and release MOTSC.
And where does it go?
The peptide travels out of the mitochondria, enters the nucleus of the cell, and activates a critical enzyme called AMPK.
AMPK, that's the fuel gauge, right?
Exactly. AMPK acts as the cellular fuel gauge. When MOTSC activates it, the cell recognizes it is running out of energy and shifts its entire metabolism. It drastically increases glucose uptake into the muscle cells and ramps up fatty acid oxidation.
Wow.
So by injecting exogenous MOTSC, an athlete is essentially flooding their system with an exercise mimicking signal, forcing the body to optimize energy production and resist fatigue even when the system is failing.
But wait, MOTSC is essentially demanding that the cell produce more energy. But if the mitochondria are physically damaged from oxidative stress, like you mentioned earlier, commanding them to work harder won't fix the physical problem.
No, it won't. You can't just whip a tired horse.
Right. Which brings us to the synergistic partner, often stacked with MOTSC for endurance. SS31, or ilomeprotide.
Yes, SS31 addresses the physical damage. Inside the mitochondria, the actual production of ATP occurs on the highly folded inner membrane across the electron transport chain.
Okay.
When free radicals damage this membrane, electrons leak out, halting energy production and causing more cellular damage. SS31 is a tiny, highly specialized peptide that permeates the cell, enters the mitochondria, and specifically binds to a unique phospholipid on that inner membrane called cardiolipin.
So it acts as a physical patch.
Exactly. It acts as a structural stabilizer. By binding to cardiolipin, SS31 instantly restores the curvature and integrity of the inner mitochondrial membrane. It optimizes the electron transport chain, stopping the electron leakage.
It plugs the holes.
It immediately neutralizes the oxidative stress and allows the damaged mitochondria to resume efficient ATP production.
So by stacking SS31 and MOTSC, the athlete is using SS31 to physically repair the damaged hardware of the existing mitochondria, while MOTSC provides the software command to undergo mitochondrial biogenesis, building brand new, highly efficient cellular engines.
It is a comprehensive rescue of the cellular bioenergetic system.
Bringing this back to you, the listener, you likely aren't running 100-mile races, but this mechanism explains so much about modern chronic exhaustion. People suffering from long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome, or profound age-related metabolic resistance often hit a wall where no amount of sleep, caffeine, or rest helps.
Because you can't sleep your way out of mitochondrial dysfunction.
Right. This biology shows us why. The problem isn't a lack of sleep. The hardware inside their cells is structurally broken. Their mitochondria are leaking electrons and failing to produce ATP.
The extreme environment of an ultramarathon simply accelerates and magnifies the cellular degradation that occurs slowly as we age or face chronic immunological stress. Restoring mitochondrial integrity is the foundational step in treating metabolic plateaus in the general population.
Okay, so we've established how to fix the physical hardware with BPC 157 and the metabolic engines with MOTSC. But physical repair doesn't happen while you're awake. It is entirely gated by the central nervous system.
Sleep is the ultimate performance enhancer.
If the brain isn't descending into deep sleep, those repair signals are essentially muted. How are clinics forcing the nervous system to power down and initiate repair? Let's explore the peptides regulating sleep, cognition, and longevity.
Well, systemic recovery is entirely dependent on the circadian rhythm, the internal biological clock that dictates when cells divide and repair. And in the longevity space, a peptide called epidolon is heavily researched for its impact on this exact clock.
Epidolon, what is it?
It is a synthetic tetrapeptide, a remarkably small chain of only 4 amino acids. It was developed in Russia, modeled after a naturally occurring peptide secreted by the pineal gland.
And the pineal gland is the control center for melatonin, the master sleep hormone.
Correct. As humans age, or when athletes endure sustained, massive physical stress, the pineal gland calcifies, and its ability to secrete melatonin in a distinct, youthful, rhythmic pulse degrades.
You lose the architectural depth of your sleep. You just toss and turn.
Exactly. Epitalon acts directly on the pineal gland to restore that youthful melatonin secretion pattern, driving the nervous system into much deeper, more restorative sleep cycles.
But that's not the only reason the longevity crowd loves it.
No, its prominence in longevity circles actually stems from a completely different mechanism. Its theorized ability to upregulate telomerase.
Okay, let's clearly define telomeres for the listener without relying on the cliche of shoelace caps.
Please, no shoelace analogies.
Think of cell division like making a digital copy of a massive file. Every time the cell divides and copies its DNA, the copying mechanism can't quite reach the very end of the data string. To prevent crucial genetic data from being lost, the ends of your chromosomes are buffered by meaningless, repeating sequences of DNA called telomeres. They act like a protective blank margin on a document. But with every cell division, that margin gets shorter and shorter.
That is an incredibly accurate representation of cellular senescence. When that margin, the telomere, finally runs out, the cell recognizes that dividing again would corrupt its essential DNA.
So it stops dividing.
It enters senescence. It becomes a zombie cell, incapable of dividing, but constantly secreting inflammatory signals that damage surrounding healthy cells. This shortening is the biological clock of aging.
And where does telomerase fit in?
Telomerase is the enzyme that actually rebuilds those repeating DNA margins, physically extending the lifespan of the cell. Clinical trials have demonstrated that epitalon significantly upregulates telomerase activity, suggesting it can preserve genomic stability and actively delay cellular senescence.
So it's not just helping you sleep, it's potentially extending the functional lifespan of your DNA.
That's the theory, yes.
And for those athletes whose nervous systems are so flooded with cortisol from overtraining that they are suffering from severe insomnia, the sources also point to DSIP.
Deep sleep-inducing peptide. Severe overtraining essentially locks the autonomic nervous system in a state of sympathetic fight or flight.
The gas pedal is stuck down.
Stuck down hard. Cortisol remains persistently elevated, preventing the brain from entering delta wave sleep. Delta sleep is the deepest phase of non-REM sleep, and it is the exact window where the pituitary naturally releases its massive pulses of growth hormone to repair the day's damage.
So if you don't hit delta,
you don't recover, period. DSIP is utilized to forcefully lower that cortisol baseline, actively promoting the descent into delta wave sleep.
so we have profound recovery happening at night. But these clinics are also focusing on the waking hours, specifically utilizing cognitive peptides. Let's look at Cmax.
Cmax is brilliant. It's a neuroactive peptide derived from a fragment of adrenocorticotropic hormone. It doesn't target muscle or bone. It strictly targets the central nervous system.
What's the mechanism there?
Its primary mechanism involves massively upregulating BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is essentially fertilizer for the brain.
Nice.
It promotes neuroplasticity, the growth of new synapses, and protects existing neurons from oxidative stress. Users experience heightened cognitive focus, rapid learning acquisition, and an intense resistance to mental fatigue.
Now, the source material from Perfect B noted a really crucial logistical distinction about Cmax. Every growth hormone peptide we've discussed, CJC 1295, ipamorelin, is injected late at night to mimic the body's natural nocturnal repair cycle. But Cmax is the exact opposite.
Right, because peptide therapy relies on mimicking natural biological rhythms. Timing is literally everything. Cmax is highly stimulating to the central nervous system. It aligns with the body's natural morning arousal cycle, the cortisol awakening response.
So if you took it at night,
If a patient were to inject Cmax in the evening, the massive upregulation of neurotrophic factors and dopamine would completely shatter their ability to sleep. You'd be staring at the ceiling until dawn. It just demonstrates that these aren't just drugs you take whenever you feel like it. They must be synchronized with your natural circadian biology.
if a listener has tracked with us this far, they're undoubtedly thinking, this sounds like the ultimate biological cheat code.
It really does.
We're talking about compounds that sprout new blood vessels, rebuild damaged mitochondria, force deep sleep, protect DNA, which begs the immediate question, where do I buy this? And is this even legal? We have to navigate the regulatory landscape.
The legal landscape is complex, to say the least.
Let's look at the elite level first. What is the World Anti-Doping Agency stance on peptide therapy?
The W prohibited list for 2026 is comprehensive, uncompromising, and highly categorized based on the exact mechanisms of action we just discussed. Let's evaluate the primary categories. Category S2 covers peptide hormones, growth factors, and related substances.
Okay, what falls into that?
Under S2, The exogenous administration of human growth hormone, and literally any compound that acts as a growth hormone secretagogue, is strictly banned.
Wow. Okay.
That instantly invalidates the use of CJC 1295, ipamorelin, and tesamorelin for any tested athlete.
So the muscle builders are entirely banned. What about the mitochondrial optimizers like MOTSC? They aren't building muscle, they're just clearing glucose and fat.
They fall under category S for hormone and metabolic modulators. Because MOTSC directly activates the AMPK pathway, fundamentally altering how the cell utilizes energy substrates to artificially enhance endurance, MyGIA classifies it as a performance-enhancing metabolic modulator. It is strictly prohibited.
And what about BPC 157? If a soccer player tears their ACL, surely the governing body allows them to heal their connective tissue faster.
EPC 157 is arguably the most fiercely debated compound in sports medicine, but its current status is definitive. It is banned under Category S0.
Category S0, what is that?
Category S0 is a catch-all designation for unapproved substances. It mandates that any pharmacological substance not currently approved by a governmental health authority for human therapeutic use is automatically banned in competition. Because BPC 157 remains an experimental compound without formal FDA clinical approval for systemic use, WADO prohibits it entirely.
Okay, that dictates the reality for competitive athletes. But what is the legal reality for the average person listening? Because the FDA recently executed a massive crackdown on the availability of these compounds, specifically targeting compounding pharmacies. Why did BPC 157 and TB 500 get moved to Category 2?
The regulatory shift in the United States regarding compounding pharmacies has been severe. The FDA moved BPC 157 and TB 500 to Category 2, which effectively means the agency has determined there is insufficient long-term human safety data to allow compounding pharmacies to bulk produce these specific molecules.
And what's their primary concern?
The core of the FDA's argument revolves around the unpredictable risk of immunogenicity.
Immunogenicity. Let's break down that biological cascade. This is when the body decides that the healing peptide is actually a hostile invader.
Exactly. When you inject a synthetic peptide, even if it is modeled on a naturally occurring human sequence, it can sometimes contain minor impurities, or the injection process itself can alter its conformation.
It looks a little off to the body.
Right. The immune system is constantly scanning the blood for foreign pathogens. If specialized immune cells, called antigen-presenting cells, detect the synthetic peptide and identify it as foreign, they present it to T cells.
Sounding the alarm.
This triggers the immune system to manufacture specific antibodies designed to hunt down and destroy the peptide.
So in a mild scenario, the peptide simply stops working because the antibodies neutralize it before it can ever reach the tendon. But what is the severe scenario?
The severe scenario is a hypersensitivity cascade. Upon subsequent injections, the massive presence of antibodies can trigger an uncontrolled immune response, leading to rapid systemic inflammation, hives, respiratory distress, and ultimately anaphylaxis.
It is a life-threatening event.
Yes. Due to this theoretical immunogenic risk, combined with a lack of phase 3 human clinical trials, the FDA severely restricted their domestic production.
This leaves the consumer in a massive gray area. If obtaining pharmaceutical-grade BPC 157 is nearly impossible through standard U.S. pharmacies, and users want to avoid the risks of immunogenicity, the WADI bans, and the daily subcutaneous injections, what are the completely legal oral alternatives that still leverage these biological signaling principles?
It's a great question. The most scientifically validated, entirely legal signaling alternative for structural repair is highly specialized oral type 1 collagen peptides.
But wait, we established in the very first section that the stomach's proteolytic enzymes shred peptide bonds. Why doesn't the stomach acid destroy oral collagen?
Because standard intact collagen is a massive triple helix protein structure that the stomach absolutely does destroy. However, clinical grade collagen peptides undergo a highly controlled enzymatic hydrolyzation process before you ever ingest them.
They're pre-digested.
Exactly. They are pre-digested into incredibly tiny specific dipeptides and tripeptides, mostly containing the amino acids hydroxyproline and glycine. Studies published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry confirm that these specific tiny sequences survive the highly acidic stomach environment.
Really?
Yes, they achieve a bioavailability of up to 63% entering the bloodstream intact.
That's huge.
And once in the blood, they act exactly like signaling molecules, docking with fibroblasts in your joints and commanding an upregulation in new collagen synthesis. They are safe, highly effective, and completely WOD approved.
Okay, if oral collagen peptides handle the joints, are there legal alternatives for muscle building and sleep that don't involve injecting gray market chemicals?
The most fascinating development in legal alternatives right now is the application of artificial intelligence to nutrition.
AI is everywhere.
It really is. Biotech companies are utilizing AI to scan the massive genomes of common plant proteins, searching for specific hidden peptide sequences that happen to mimic the physiological signals we desire. Two massive breakthroughs in this field are PeptiStrong and PeptiSleep.
How does the AI extract a muscle building signal from a plant?
Well, PeptiStrong is a specific network of peptides discovered entirely by AI derived from the fava bean. Clinical trials have demonstrated that when ingested, these specific plant sequences downregulate pathways associated with muscle atrophy and significantly increase muscle protein synthesis.
From the fava bean.
From a fava bean, they achieve an anabolic state without ever interacting with the human endocrine system or altering testosterone levels.
And PeptiSleep is doing the same thing for the nervous system.
PeptiSleep consists of sequences isolated from rice bran protein. Instead of mimicking growth hormone, these plant peptides have been shown to actively suppress cortisol levels and interact with the GABAergic system in the brain to facilitate faster sleep onset and dramatically extend the duration of deep delta wave sleep.
That's incredible.
And the best part is these AI-discovered plant peptides are NSF certified for sport, making them rigorously tested, perfectly legal for elite athletes, and available without a prescription.
The idea that AI is mining the genetic code of a fava bean to find a sequence that prevents human muscle wasting is just staggering. But let's address the listener who understands all the risks. They aren't a BATA-tested athlete. They have a severe chronic injury or a massive metabolic plateau, and they are fully committed to pursuing clinical injectable peptide therapy.
They want the real deal.
You want the absolute strongest tools available. What is the beginner's roadmap to starting safely? Because navigating to a random website and buying a vial labeled not for human consumption research chemical only is incredibly dangerous.
It is playing Russian roulette with your biology. When you buy unregulated research chemicals from internet vendors, there is zero oversight. You have no guarantee of the amino acid sequence purity. You could be injecting a degraded, ineffective powder, or far worse, a vial contaminated with heavy metals, bacterial endotoxins, or completely unlisted synthetic chemicals. Engaging in peptide therapy safely mandates working directly with a specialized, licensed regenerative medicine clinic.
How does a beginner identify a legitimate clinic? What are the non-negotiable criteria?
A legitimate medically supervised clinic will never prescribe these compounds without extensive prior biological data. A safe protocol mandates comprehensive initial and ongoing blood lab monitoring.
What are they looking for?
If you are exploring growth hormone secretagogues like CJC1295, the physician must establish your baseline IGF-1 levels. They must run an HS-CRP high-sensitivity C-reactive protein to measure systemic inflammation, and crucially, they absolutely must check your fasting insulin and HbA1c.
Why is tracking fasting insulin so critical when manipulating growth hormone?
Because growth hormone is inherently antagonistic to insulin. Elevated growth hormone mobilizes massive amounts of free fatty acids into the bloodstream for energy. This abundance of fatty acids can temporarily block insulin receptors on the muscle cells, inducing a transient state of insulin resistance.
Oh, wow. So if a patient already has poor glycemic control,
Introducing secretagogues can push their blood sugar into a dangerous pre-diabetic range. If a clinic is not meticulously tracking your metabolic markers, they are flying blind and risking your long-term health.
beyond the blood, how do they measure the actual physical result? I mean, a mirror isn't a clinical tool.
Leading clinics rely on objective, high-resolution tracking, most commonly utilizing advanced bioelectrical impedance analysis like the in-body scan.
The scale you stand on with the handles.
Yes. This technology sends specific frequencies through the body to measure precise intracellular and extracellular tissue densities. It maps exactly how many pounds of skeletal muscle mass you have, your precise visceral fat volume, and your extracellular water retention.
Why is water retention important to track?
Because manipulating the pituitary can often cause severe water retention. The physician uses this objective data to dial in the exact dosage of the peptide. If your extracellular water spikes, they adjust the dose immediately.
Let's decode the day-to-day logistics for the absolute beginner. When a patient receives a legal pharmaceutical prescription, what does the actual medication look like and how is it prepared? Because it doesn't come in an EpiPen, right?
No, pharmaceutical grade peptides do not arrive as a liquid ready to be injected. Because the amino acid chains are so fragile, they degrade rapidly in water at room temperature. Therefore, they're shipped as a lyophilized powder.
Lyophilized, meaning freeze-dried.
Yes, lyophilization is a highly complex freeze-drying process that removes all moisture while perfectly preserving the three-dimensional structure of the peptide. It arrives looking like a tiny, solid white puck at the bottom of a sterile glass vial.
So the patient have to perform the reconstitution themselves. Walk us through the chemistry of that preparation.
The patient is provided with a separate vial of bacteriostatic water. This is sterile water that contains exactly 0.9% benzyl alcohol. The benzyl alcohol acts as a preservative, preventing any bacterial growth once the vial is punctured.
Okay, so you mix them.
Right. Using a sterile syringe, the patient carefully draws the calculated amount of bacteriostatic water and injects it into the vial containing the lyophilized peptide puck. But the critical rule of reconstitution is that you never shake the vial.
Oh.
Vigorous shaking creates sheer force that can literally snap the delicate peptide bonds. You gently roll the vial until the powder dissolves into a clear liquid. Once reconstituted, the liquid must be stored in the refrigerator to prevent degradation.
And the actual administration. We mentioned subcutaneous injections, but what is the physical reality of doing this every day? Does it hurt?
Subcutaneous administration targets the adipose tissue, the layer of fat situated between the skin and the muscle. It utilizes an insulin syringe, typically a 31 gauge needle that is only 5/16 of an inch long.
That's tiny.
The needle is so microscopically thin that it rarely triggers nerve endings. Most patients report feeling absolutely nothing. The injection is typically performed in the fatty tissue of the abdomen.
Finally, we need to address the concept of cycling. You do not just take CJC 1295 every single day for the rest of your life. Why do clinics enforce strict on and off cycles?
Because the human body is a master of adaptations, specifically regarding receptor sensitivity. If you constantly bombard a cellular receptor with a high volume signal, even a natural signal like a secretagogue, the cell responds to the overwhelming stimulus by initiating downregulation.
It turns down the volume.
It literally retracts the receptors from its surface, becoming deaf to the message to protect itself from overstimulation. To prevent this receptor burnout, cycling is mandatory.
What does a cycle look like?
A standard clinical protocol might involve injecting the peptide 5 days a week with 2 days off to mimic the body's natural fluctuating rhythms. Furthermore, a patient might run the protocol for 3 months, followed by a mandatory 1-month washout period completely off the compound.
And that washout period resets everything.
Exactly. It allows the cellular receptors to fully upregulate and resensitize, ensuring the therapy remains potent long term.
We have covered a massive expanse of biology today. We have mapped the physical, the metabolic, the legal, and the logistical realities of peptide therapy. We explored how stacking CJC 1295 and ipamorelin exploits the pituitary gland's natural rhythms to aggressively preserve muscle and burn visceral fat.
The golden stack.
We broke down the Wolverine stack, showing how BPC 157 forces angiogenesis to build new blood vessels, while TB500 mobilizes actin to accelerate surgical healing without restrictive scar tissue.
Truly revolutionary.
We dove into the mitochondria, seeing how MOTSC and SS31 act as software commands and hardware patches to save ultra-endurance athletes from bioenergetic collapse. And we analyzed the LAUDA bands, the FDA's concerns over immunogenicity, and the AI-driven future of legal plant peptides.
It is an immense volume of physiological data, but it all coalesces around a singular transformative reality in modern medicine. We are abandoning the archaic model of symptom management and passive waiting. We have mapped the chemical language of the cell, and we are now actively writing the code to dictate human recovery, bioenergetics, and longevity at the molecular level.
And to you, the listener, whether you are trying to accelerate your recovery from a torn ligament, attempting to break through a wall of chronic metabolic fatigue, or just trying to retain your muscle mass while losing weight, this precision-targeted biology is the future. We are no longer dropping bricks at the construction site and hoping a house gets built. We are directly emailing the architects the exact blueprints.
But as we've established, with that level of power comes the absolute necessity for rigorous medical oversight, lab tracking, and respect for the biological cascades you are triggering.
The ability to intervene at the cellular level requires a profound respect for the homeostasis you are attempting to alter. I want to leave you with one final provocative concept to consider. We have spent this entire deep dive discussing how we can synthesize the exact chemical text messages required to heal a severed tendon in weeks instead of months, or command a damaged cellular engine to rebuild itself. If we have truly discovered the dictionary to the human body's internal communication network, how long will it be before we view the physical decline of aging itself not as an inevitable biological endpoint, but simply as a massive system-wide cellular miscommunication?
A miscommunication that we now have the encrypted emails to finally correct.
That is the ultimate horizon of regenerative science. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning and keep decoding.
Wow. Well, that was a great episode. I definitely learned a lot about the GLP-1 drug and how to train properly with runners. Also learned a little bit more about peptides. It does seem like it's going to be the future, and hopefully they can get some of this stuff passed in July to help the human race, so we can just be, I guess, better. And that hopefully it's not a conspiracy theory about Big Pharma trying to not let it be regulated with the peptides. But hopefully that's just some kind of conspiracy theory. So hopefully that's all that it is. And hopefully we can get these peptides safely to the consumer. That way nobody gets hurt, and you can heal quicker, I guess. But yeah, very interesting. Looks like there's lots of peptides right now for healing, and it's just going to get even better, I guess, as more research comes out on these peptides. So a little crazy, but I'm glad we did an episode on peptides and GLP-1. I know it was a subject that I knew little about. Yeah, I don't take any peptides at the moment. I don't have any experience, but I'm glad I was able to learn a little bit. And then also, hopefully you guys were able to learn a little bit about the GLP-1 drug, or not drug, but peptide, and then just more about the peptides. And I'll definitely be focused and have to see what's going on in July, see what kind of updates go on with the peptides, and see if they approve any of them. So anyways, thanks for listening to the episode. Once again, I know that there's a lot of content out there, so whether it be audiobooks, music, or somebody else's podcast. So appreciate you tuning in. You can always follow, and that way you'll get the latest and greatest episode available to you. And then it's easy to click and easy to download before you run. Once again, I just look at a great episode that I think gears towards ultra running, and something that maybe an athlete struggles with. I know I struggle with all kinds of subjects with ultra running. So it's definitely easy for me to come up with an idea for sure. I got tons of them. So, but if there's an idea that I haven't covered and you'd like to hear more about it, be happy to do some research and upload a podcast episode for you. You can always reach me at runningmileschd@gmail.com. And then once again, if you need a coach, you can always reach out to Run Team, and that's where I coach on. So you can reach out, and I'll be happy to get you a plan and hold you accountable for the training and help you out with the best of my knowledge, so you can finish the race or come in first place, whatever you would like. So yeah, thanks again for listening. Remember to follow. I know it's really easy to follow. You just hit the follow button there. So it's pretty easy to do that. So just do that if you're listening and you like what you hear. Anyways, next week we'll be doing under eating is the next episode. So we'll do an episode on under eating. I know with myself, I probably underate protein for sure in my last 100K. So that's probably not good. So we're just learning more about that and how we can make sure that we're eating enough during training and race day. So anyways, yeah, that would be the next episode. And remember, each new episode will be dropped at 3 a.m. on Saturday. I do that just thinking that maybe you're going out for your long run. And when I was into the training, usually I would wake up at 3. That way you get out the door by 4 if you do wake up. So hopefully that gives you plenty of time to download the episode before you get going. Yeah, I appreciate you guys listening, and catch you on the next episode.